UPREITs are great if you're planning on being dead in 5 years. That's the fast off-ramp from real property ownership.
Both thought we were invincible until we found out we weren't. I'm more concerned with wealth preservation. I think people should be more concerned with wealth preservation than ultimate ROI on things these days.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
There is no guarantee that any strategy will be successful or achieve investment objectives. All real estate investments have the potential to lose value during the life of the investments. The income stream and depreciation schedule for any investment property may affect the property owner's income bracket and/or tax status. An unfavorable tax ruling may cancel deferral of capital gains and result in immediate tax liabilities. All financed real estate investments have potential for foreclosure. Because 1031 exchanges are commonly offered through private placement offerings and are illiquid securities, there is no secondary market for these investments. Like any investment in real estate, if a property unexpectedly loses tenants or sustains substantial damage, there is potential for suspension of cash flow distributions. Costs associated with the transaction may impact investors' returns and may outweigh the tax benefits. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. David Moore, one half of the Exchange Bros, and I've got my old friend, Mr. Robert Smith, here with me today with Peregrine Private Capital. For future context, it's my son Winston's birthday. If you guys don't know Winston, you probably don't know it's his birthday, but it's September 30th of 2025. Happy birthday, Win. So we're going to have some conversation today about 721s, a variety of different DST options. It's sort of a different market right now for a variety of reasons. We just had this huge interest rate drop. But it's sort of funny. I mean, the quarter point was at 2 weeks ago now, and I think a lot of people have been waiting for things to happen. It's definitely impacted the market a little bit, but what's a quarter point going to do? And exactly, not much. But Bob, it's been a while since we've done this, so why don't you just give people sort of an update of what you're seeing in the marketplace, and then we'll sort of launch into the 721 conversation.
The market remains slow, and part of that is people anticipating more interest rate changes or a more favorable interest rate environment coming in the near future. But I think a lot of it is also the uncertainty introduced by the Trump administration, not being critical of the current administration, but Donald Trump is right now he's the world's greatest change agent. And that has unsettled lots of things from a market standpoint. So I think there's still a lot of apprehension out there in the marketplace in terms of how these things, he's introduced some obviously seismic changes, both domestically and internationally. And I think a lot of people are simply waiting to see how all of that shakes out before they start moving around big pieces in their portfolio. Obviously, the Fed changing direction or its focus, modifying it from inflation to the labor market is going to help as interest rates go down. But I think a lot of it is just a wait and see, people in a wait and see mode, given all the changes afoot, catalyzed by the current administration.
Well, like you said, it's a global phenomenon, right? I mean, there's ripples everywhere, whether we're talking about the tariffs or immigration or drug war or whatever it might be. And I think that things are just sort of moving so fast, it's hard for people to really get their feet under themselves. And it's sort of interesting. I think I'd like to do one of these with my friend Troy Eckert Oil and Gas out of Dallas, because I was at a presentation that he actually invited me to go, sort of be a part of in Carlsbad. This is probably 6 months ago now. And you think about during the campaign, the whole drill baby drill thing and all that, and you think, okay, well, gee, conservatives come in, take over the White House. Hey, all of a sudden oil's going to be available, drilling's going to happen, and that's going to be a good thing for her. And Troy sort of made some comments. It's like, okay, Well, the oil industry doesn't necessarily like all that to be open up, because what happens to price of oil, and they end up, their profits start going down a little bit. So Troy, I think I want to get Troy on here. We've talked about the oil and gas, because oil and gas, there are oil and gas investment opportunities that are passive that qualify for 1031. So we do a fair amount of business with them, and I think it'd be good to just have a conversation. You haven't met Troy. I think it'd be a good conversation to have. But you think about, even in that world, things are afoot and changing. So I guess what I'd like to start off saying is that obviously, I handle tax deferred exchanges. We handle retirement accounts. We don't sell investments, provide investment advice. You're going to talk to somebody like Bob for that stuff. So I sort of like my position, because I'm not really putting that stuff out there. I just sort of listen to what my people want to do and sort of give them an avenue to do it. And I think that my big push right now is what good is tax deferral if what you buy goes away? Or I want to make sure we're validating somebody's reason to do the exchange. It makes sense. I had a client in here, I don't know, yesterday, I believe it was, and we were just talking about, she had a property that she bought 6 years ago for $1.8 million, and it's worth $1.5 million today. And she said, well, I had exchanged into it. And I said, well, how long did you have the property before you did that exchange? And she didn't inherit it. So you think, okay, well, she inherited property, stepped up basis. And so my question to her was, okay, we just had a $300,000 loss over the last 6 years on this thing. How much gain was deferred into this situation? And does this current transaction make sense? And just for context, in her transaction, she has family in Los Angeles. She lives up here, and she's wanting to buy a condo down south. Surprise, surprise, one of her daughters has a grandkid, right? Or a grandkid for her. So you know what that draws like with your wife. And I know what it's going to be like if I become a granddad at some point. There's going to be some pull to be there, right? And so for her situation, I said, look, we have a $300,000 erosion in what the gain that was deferred into it. If we do this transaction, we can go buy you the condo down there, and ultimately she's probably going to move into the thing. So she's going to have a wait period before it's got a season, so she's going to rent it out for a period of time before she can move into it. And so she's effectively going to put her life on hold for, let's say, a year and a half, whatever it might be, whatever she and her tax people deem a reasonable period of seasoning before she moves in that thing. I said, well, so now you're carrying 2 properties. What's the carrying cost? What's the total tax exposure? And I said, I'm happy to do the exchange for you. And this is one of the things, I'm just going to toot my own horn right now. Tom and I put the company together in 1991, and we're blessed to be in a situation where we don't have to do every deal, right? So, AI is coming in hard. I'm not going to beat it up too much today, but does AI ask somebody when they're coming and do an exchange? I mean, you start answering questions, it's going to say, okay, what I need to do an exchange, but is it going to actually rationalize the exchange? It's going to actually ask this person, okay, so what are you doing with this? What's the repercussions of buying a property via 1031, moving into it, and then a sale inside 5 years, after 5 years, what rules apply, what tax consequences are going to be there, all of that. It's not going to, at least at this point. Someday maybe. But it's that fluid conversation. So when you engage somebody, and Bob, you and I met each other, I think probably the first time in probably 97, somewhere in there, 98. And I remember doing presentations with you. I remember one of the big presentations you and I did was for Invest Northwest. Remember down at OMSI?
Yeah.
And that was a big room. We had 400 people there or something like that. It was a great time. And that was an old friend, Randy Smith, the Western Equities. Randy's, I think, floating around the Caribbean on his Grand Banks or something these days, but I haven't talked to him recently. But that was a great time and a lot of momentum. But the reason I bring that up is DSTs didn't exist then. We were talking about institutional ticks probably at that point, and the DSTs came to be right around 2000. You tell me. And then we're going to talk about 721 today, and 721. When 721 sort of come to be? I mean, we dealt with 721 and the whole cleanup, mop up of SunWest. That was very unfortunate during that recession. And they used 721 to sort of, salvage people that could go forward with that. If they went for the ride via 721, those people were made whole. If they couldn't, they had some major problems there. That was something I don't need to go through again, is that whole crash, but a hard stop. But any comments on sort of the history of 721, why it came to be, and sort of where you see things going right now?
Well, 721's been around for a long time. It hasn't played a material part in the exchange business until very recently. Mm-hmm. And the catalyst for that is exclusively Wall Street. DSTs are not a Wall Street product. DSTs were created 26 years ago by two companies, the Pasco Group out of Southern California and Inland out of Chicago. And DSTs, from a business standpoint, started on the West Coast and slowly but surely migrated east. Okay? And through that formative period, or the missionary period of DST, Wall Street paid it little notice because from a volume standpoint, it wasn't significant. A couple years ago, we hit about $10, $15 billion in business a year transactionally. That got Wall Street's attention. And Wall Street asked itself, how do we get our piece of that pie? And so they took the existing UPREIT, 721 UPREIT, and amplified that through Ares and other products, which is something that their people in captive broker-dealer networks, Morgan Stanley, whomever, have on their platform. They do not have DST properties, nor have they ever had DST properties on their platform. The exclusive distribution network for DSTs historically has been the independent broker-dealer network, of which we are a part, which are small, independently run broker-dealers that do not have proprietary product. They're the mirror opposite of the captive broker-dealer networks with tens of thousands of brokers. And due to the idiosyncratic nature of DST properties, they're smaller. It doesn't lend itself to distribution over thousands of brokers. So they don't have that available to them. But Wall Street wanted and successfully did lever into the DST business with the UPREIT, which is something that their captive broker-dealer networks have available to them. So when a client walks in, you're working for one of those captive broker-dealer networks, and you manage somebody's stock and bond portfolio, and they happen to mention in passing, "Oh, I'm about to sell a commercial property." A little light goes on. How do I get that money out of real estate and into the financial markets? Hence the 721 UPREIT. And so the captive broker-dealer people and others only tell part of the story. They immediately drag out the UPREIT and say, hey, look, this is what you have to do. This is what you've got to do. And as such, it's not an error of omission on their part. They're not telling a lie or a fib because it can be part of the solution. It's usually an error of omission because they're not telling their clients about the world of DST properties they do not have available to them that is an even bigger part of the solution. So that's really why 721 has become enjoys a much higher profile now than it has historically, because it's an avenue, or the principal avenue, for financial representatives and captive broker-dealer networks to convert that money, which has historically been domiciled in real property, into security, because when you move into a 721 UPREIT, your fractional interest in a DST property automatically converts into operating units of the REIT, which can then be bought, then can be sold when they are changed into shares of the REIT. So it gets the money. It's the fast, an UPREIT is the fast exit out of real property and into the financial markets where things can be easily bought and sold. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if you are at the end from a real estate standpoint. We're fond of telling people UPREITs are great if you're planning on being dead in 5 years, because you can't 1031 exchange out of an UPREIT, and because all 721 UPREITs are privately held, okay, there is only one buyer of that REIT that you can sell to, and that's REIT management.
So that's I think that's really critical for people to understand. It's not like you're exchanging into this DST that's rolling into shares of a normal publicly traded REIT that's managed by ABC.
David, that's the best possible point to make.
Yes.
Because I can't tell you how many calls we've taken from investors who have already been exchanged into an UPREIT, and they are ignorant of how ignorant they are. They don't even know what it is. The person who has facilitated that transaction has not either taken the time or been willing to adequately explain to them that this is not a publicly traded product. So you can't just roll into it and sell it at will. The only option available to you is to sell it back to REIT management at a predetermined price, at a predetermined time. And so your liquidity options, and that's the principal way it's sold to people. Well, you can get, you can create your, the problem with DST is you have to wait until management decides to sell the property. Oh, you roll into a 721 UPREIT, and God, you can call your own shot in terms of liquidity. Yes and no, okay? All 721 UPREITs have redemption caps in terms of how much management is legally required to redeem at any one time. And if there happens to be a run on the bank, you can just get in line with everybody else and wait to try to redeem your shares.
I was just going to say run on the bank.
Yeah. So,
hey.
Yeah.
No, I think
so that's a very
big point.
That's the best possible point.
So let me ask you. So just for everybody out there, what he just said is, don't think that you can just exchange into this DST that rolls into the UPREIT, and when it does that, you're instantly going to be able to sell all your shares of that UPREIT. It's not. There's a annual redemption for most of these companies that are going to allow
all of them have that.
X shares done. And by the way, these are not, you can't just, all DSTs are not 721s. And you need to understand when you buy into one of these things what the PPM reads as far as what will happen. Because I've heard stories, people saying, well, gee, I didn't know that it was going to go. I didn't have a choice. They took it 721. I didn't want it.
David,
and the reason you don't want that to happen is it pigeonholes you. Because as Bob said, when you get it, I think 721 is a great end game for people like you said. It's that we've got a couple clients right now that are terminal, and they don't want their spouses to be saddled with management of the assets that they've had, and upon their passing, they'll get stepped up basis and they can sell those things, but they need to understand how much can be redeemed in any one given period, how long it's going to take to get there. I think that they're great in lieu of an installment sale, because installment sales, people just don't understand they're going to be on the hook for debt relief and tax on debt relief and depreciation recapture in the year sale, on top of any principal payments. They just don't understand that. So I have that conversation all the time. One of the most viewed videos on our YouTube channel is installment sales, talking about this stuff. So I think it's a great avenue for people, but you need to understand sort of the teeth that are there too. And you've been talking about, before we started filming today, you started talking about some things I really wanted to get on film. And I think it's a great option, but you got to understand, if you get into it, what your rights are, and then what the repercussions of that action is, because it is a dead end. There's no way out of that transaction without paying tax, short of becoming an angel, like you said earlier.
Right. And, to paraphrase great Clint Eastwood, a man's got to know his limitations. And before you enter into a 721 UPREIT, you as an investor have to know its limitations. And 99 out of 100 investors that go into UPREITs know nothing about the limitations of that vehicle, and the rep usually doesn't take the time to explain it in any great detail. And that's the rub, or that's where the failing is. It's not that it can't be part of the solution, but it is very seldom adequately explained in terms of its limitations as part of that solution. So before you pull that trigger, you better make damn sure you understand it completely. And as you just said, I can't remember how many people I've talked to that said, well, I didn't know the DST that I was investing in was tied to an UPREIT, and that was my only avenue. And so they were, in essence, forced into it. So you as an investor have to fully inform yourself as to what the structure of that program is.
Well, and let me ask you this. So when we sort of went through the history of that DST briefly, we talked about institutional ticks, and around 2000, you said 2 companies kicked off that DST space. And we went from 2 companies to, I believe it was, 70 pre-crash. And then we dropped to a half dozen, and now we're back to 60, I believe. And we're going to have another one of these with some people that actually provide all those statistics. That'll be fun if we can ever get that booked. But I think the reason I bring that up is, once again, back to my comment, what good is tax deferral if what you buy doesn't work out? And if we're looking at a space where you've got 50 plus sponsors of different things that have never seen a bad day. Maybe some of the people that work there have, but my experience is, and you and I like to play with a lot of fast things that go fast and hit hard and whatever. I think we both thought we were invincible until we found out we weren't, and at this point we're painfully aware that we're not invincible anymore, right? So I think that when we're looking at these things, I think it's really we're at a point in time where I'm old enough where I'm more concerned with wealth preservation. I think people should be more concerned with wealth preservation than ultimate ROI on things these days. So, we talk about a variety of different things, and you and I have done a lot of transactions, a lot of ticks and DSTs and 721s through the years, and we'll continue to do that until we can't, I guess. But I think people need to understand there's products out there for different needs. And as I mentioned earlier, maybe it's oil and gas for you. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's the DST. Maybe it is a 721. Maybe it's a opportunity zone. Who knows? But the idea is when Bob and I do these things that we try to provide, arm you with information that enables you to make an intelligent decision on what you want and where you're going. And I think that's the big thing. So unless you're dealing with this day in, day out, and I would argue that there are financial advisors that, sell this stuff as a sideline, and there's people that focus on it. And if you're just sort of dipping your toe in the water, I welcome that. I want to help you get you and your people where they need to go. But you really need to invest the time and energy to understand the product and the history of it and what is being sold, because the 721 gives that liquidity, which people's common complaint about the DST is lack of liquidity, but lack of liquidity means, well, real estate, they say, is not liquid, right? Because, a stock, any given time, you've got a price quote, and you can sell that thing. But in this 721 space, you're not just selling to John Smith down the street. Back to your comment, the sponsor's literally the one that's going to be picking up your interest?
Correct. And so it's not just, you're not, as an investor in a 721 UPREIT, you're not just limited in terms of your potential buyer, because that buyer is the REIT sponsor. You're not limited in terms of time because it's only done at a set interval. And you're not only limited in terms of price because management determines that price. But you're also limited by the quality of the properties in that portfolio. And if you look at the two biggest 721 UPREITs currently available in the space, they have lots of legacy properties. They have office properties in them. They have retail properties in them. They have legacy properties that aren't necessarily the most desirable in today's market. So not only do you need to understand how the mechanism works that you're going into, but you also best understand the composition of that from a property type standpoint. Because if that, the argument has always been, well, a REIT's better because it diversifies you over all these different properties. That can be true if they're desirable property types moving forward in terms of the greater economy. If that program, that REIT, is burdened with legacy properties that are no longer desirable or less desirable from an institutional standpoint, like office, like parts of retail, then that diversification argument isn't as compelling, and it's obviously going to act as dead weight ultimately in terms of portfolio valuation. So there's a lot to understand about not only how an UPREIT works, but what that UPREIT you're going into is comprised of, because that's going to go a long way to determining whether your investment experience is a positive one or a negative one.
So people come, obviously we've got IRA Advantage, the sister company to Equity Advantage that handles self-directed retirement accounts. I have people come to me all the time wanting to take their IRA 401k funds to go buy real estate. If you go talk to just your regular financial advisor about diversifying your portfolio into real estate, they're going to sell you a REIT. Okay, but a REIT typically is not going to be giving you interest, deductions, depreciation. It's a stock. You're not owning real property. That entity owns the real property, and your ROI is going to be based upon whatever that, to your point, portfolio is doing, what's in it, and I hope it's not all office today, right? But you look at, and we're sitting in a building owned by a REIT right now that's probably 15% occupied, I would say. Glad I don't have shares of that REIT. But you look at this situation, and my point is, and I haven't really thought about it until we're sitting here, but so you do the exchange, you end up with a DST. The DST continues to reflect the ownership of real property. When that ends up rolling through that UPREIT into shares of the real estate investment trust, then the interest, deductions, depreciation, all that gets peeled away.
Pardon?
All of that gets peeled away.
Eventually,
all those tax
yes,
benefits of it's just something you don't think of. And here I am, somebody that deals with it day in, day out, and you just think about the nature of your investment shifts with the change of that investment. And you need to understand that.
And that's, and that's fine.
Yeah.
If you as the investor want the nature of your investment to change. And unfortunately, that's the unspoken agenda of Wall Street in their big push behind UPREITs, is they want your investment to change. Wall Street has never liked real estate. They consider it a dead asset because if real estate's doing what it's supposed to do, which is appreciate slowly over a period of time and provide you with a nice tax-sheltered income stream, it sits there. It's not something that's easily bought and sold. And Wall Street is a binary mechanism. They make all their money buying and selling your stuff as frequently as they possibly can. And so it's their unspoken agenda via UPREITs is to change the nature of your investment from real property, which cannot easily be bought and sold, to securities, which can be easily bought and sold. And that's fine if you, the investor, want to do that, okay? But if you like your real estate and want to keep your real property as part of a greater balanced portfolio, then you need to think long and hard about whether exchanging into an UPREIT is a good idea because, as we said earlier, that's the fast off-ramp from real property ownership. So if you want to leave the real property arena, an UPREIT's great. Go ahead. Go for it.
I think it's like the ultimate installment sale, right?
It is.
And you've got structured sales, you've got deferred sales trust, you've got other options there, things that come into play. But I like it because, and I know this is one of those things that's sort of up for debate, but my understanding is, and there's supposed to be case law out there supporting it, that you typically, like I said earlier, you sell something and you're going to pay tax through the gain until you get the basis. And people think, well, gee, I paid this for it, I should be able to get that out without tax, and that's not the way it works, right? You got to pay tax through the gain until you get your basis. But with the 721, it's common belief that when you roll into those shares of the UPREIT that you can sell through the basis first. And like I said, that's a different conversation, but it's something you can talk to your tax people about and see how they feel that way. So we've had situations where people want to take some money out to go buy Wall Street, and I've joked about on other podcasts we've done recently. I had one situation where the two brothers and a sister were selling a property, and our client wanted to buy one of the brother's interests out of a property, and the brother. So we got a related party transaction. The brother was not going to do an exchange because he had talked to the financial advisor and said, "Hey, I'll give you'll make 6% on the money." And my first question was, 6%, is that after you've paid 40% tax on the other stuff? How long is it going to take you to get to the 6, right? That's not realistic. It's possible, I guess, but it's not realistic, right?
No.
So my solution was, look, sit on your hands for 2 years, whatever that period of time for the redemption into the 721. But, by changing gears and having the brother that wanted to go into Wall Street do the 721, it allowed the other brother to buy his interest, because the only way he can buy his interest out via 1031 is if it's fitting the related party rules, which means that both parties have to do an exchange, both parties have to hold their respective replacements for no less than 2. So by shifting gears from the cash out, getting the quote-unquote 6, to a situation where that brother that was going to just cash out, pay the tax, and go get the 6 is now doing the exchange into the 721. It allows the other brother to do the exchange, and then the brother wanting to Wall Street it, if he waits, he's now taking that money pre-tax. And if he just sells through that basis piece and leverages that into the Wall Street, now he's pre-tax money getting, and that's going to be a more realistic 6 if he can sit on it for a little while. So, I mean, that's just an example of you don't know what you don't know. It's like we get a call to do an exchange, and I start asking, okay, what's everyone doing? We got related parties, family transactions, where are people going? How do we make it fit? And I think that's a situation where the 721 fits. I think we've got a couple of clients, like I said earlier, where terminal situations, I think that's a great opportunity for people. I just look at, I'm a real estate guy. So as you're saying, you start looking at a REIT. A REIT's a stock. It's not going to give you all the benefits and burdens of ownership of real estate. Real estate the beauty of it is it doesn't have to go up in value to make you money, right? You got somebody paying the debt service down, you got interest deduction, depreciation, all these other things going on. At the end of the day, unless you remember Bob Nelson. What a wonderful guy, right? And Bob's whole position was, real estate's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's get-rich surely, but slowly, with the golden rule of do not ever get yourself in a situation where you have to sell in a recession, right? So I think those are great rules to live by, but understand anytime you're going to sell something, understand, one, what your tax liability is. Like I said earlier with that woman that came in yesterday, it's like, what's the tax liability? What's the opportunity cost of the exchange? Does it make sense to do? And then if you've got enough gain where you're concerned about tax deferral, what options, where are you going? What's important? What do you want? And back to my comment, you don't know what you don't know. So we're talking about sort of a niche product, a couple products today, DSTs and 721s. You work with some other things too. But I think you gotta be working with people that have, one, been through the ups and downs, and two, have that the bumps and bruises from those ups and downs to tell you the stories so that you are not trapped with you don't know what you don't know. Learn from my mistakes, not having to learn yourself or be taught. So,
yeah, it's real property, and real property, if it can happen, it's gonna happen. Okay, so it's not a road without bumps, but it does have very real advantages in terms of being able to generate tax-sheltered income stream. Historically, it's been a good inflation hedge. And so it should be an important part of everyone's well-diversified portfolio. And my issue with the way 721 UPREITs are positioned or presented by most people in the captive broker-dealer networks is it's a lever to get you out of real estate, but you don't really know that's happening. And so I think that's a disservice to people in terms of not fully informing them of the ramifications of that decision and the processes that you are then in place. And so it's critical that you inform yourself as well as possible before doing that.
It's an end game.
It's an end game. It's an end game. So again, if you're planning on being dead in 5 years, great, go for it. If not, I think there are better options available to you with individual DST properties.
So Bob, sort of shifting gears a little bit, as far as if we've got, let's say, and this is happening fairly often right now. I don't know why, but it's just maybe the nature of the economy and sort of the life cycle of investments. We've had a long sort of up in values, and maybe we're having a settling, but we've got a number of, let's say, family-owned assets where we've got a group of family members as members of an entity. So 1031 prohibits the exchange of a partnership interest, so we're always looking at a swap and drop or a drop and swap. Swap and drop means we're going to do an exchange for the entity into respective properties that each of those members might want downstream. We'll complete the exchange for that entity, and then at a later date we'll change the ownership to get each of those things to the respective members. A drop and swap would be a predisposition drop of the entity into a tenancy in common. But if we're looking at back to the DST space, if we've got, let's just say for the sake of the conversation, an entity that's got 3 members, I think an easy way to have Peter, Susie, and Timmy each end up with their own stuff is we just do the exchange for the entity. Maybe we buy 3 different DSTs through you. Each of those DSTs is purchased via a new single member LLC that's got the exchanging entity as member. A year, 2 years down the road, whenever they and their tax people feels reasonable seasoning period, we do an assignment of membership interest from the entity to each of the respective owners. That structure obviously works and takes care of the transaction because a disregarded entity is no different than the entity going forward. So that would be one option to get them where they want to go. The other option is if we just complete the exchange in the entity and each of these different things. What's your experience with the different sponsors? I'm not asking you to give any names, but as far as cooperation from those sponsors with changes of ownership of those different DST offerings at a later date, how easy is that to make happen?
David's been uniformly positive. It's simply a bookkeeping function.
Yeah.
And you make a very good point there because one of the arguments we use for DST is, operating your own dirt, managing your own dirt in your 20s, 30s, 40s, even your 50s isn't so bad. It sucks in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. So everybody ages out of management. You still like real estate. You like the tax-sheltered nature of the income stream. You like the appreciation potential, but you're simply at a point in life where you don't have the time and the energy to manage anymore. That's when you start talking to people about DST. The same's true with families. I mean, families historically, very cohesive units, stronger together than apart, but eventually all family members do go their own separate ways, particularly in our culture, which is the most atomized culture on planet Earth. And a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that DSTs can give family members like that jointly own an asset a very easy avenue to individual ownership and them all going their own ways from an asset standpoint, because they can do that 1031 exchange as you just explained, albeit each individual member identifies a property, a DST property he or she prefers, and then subsequent to that exchange, ownership is then changed to vest to that individual that specific DST property to that individual, and they are all ultimately are able to go their own ways, and it's an effortless, seamless bookkeeping process that costs nothing. Yeah. So our experience with that with all property sponsors has been uniformly positive.
That's great to hear, because you and I have had many conversations through the years on one of the big objections is lack of liquidity, on a perceived lack of liquidity, and as you know, and we've got ideas on that and things that'll be bringing to the marketplaces next year. But as far as that's concerned, it's nice to see people's ability to go do that stuff. It's interesting to me because you think about, in my own family, for example, I've got, both Tom's side and my side, we've got properties that are family owned. And I just don't, we had a gentleman that we did podcast last week with, and he talked about a property that's been in the family for 150 years. 150 years. He sold a big chunk of it to Lockheed, but they still have 400 plus acres, I think. 150 years. So you think about, okay, so maybe your great-great-great-grandfather or grandmother bought it, right? And so it starts off with two owners. How many people are now owning this thing? And so you think about just in my situation, say, okay, well, initially this property's owned by three people. Well, if it goes to the next generation, it's going from 3 to, in 9. My example, it's going from 3 to 8. The next gen is going to be, 30? I don't know how
It's the Malthusian dilemma of geometric increase of population.
Exactly. So you just, it's inevitable that things are going to change. Everybody's in a different spot. Each generation, there's more disparity in where people are and what they make and what they do and thought and everything else. It's just inevitable. It's going to change. And I just sort of think about all the big old properties up in the Northeast, or you think about in Europe, you think about the castles that have been in the families for millenniums, right? It's just really, it's sort of crazy when you start thinking about the repercussions of these things. And it's a great idea. Everybody thinks, this is going to be wonderful. It's a legacy property. It's going to be there forever. And I don't know how many quote unquote legacy properties we've done exchanges for because the kids aren't getting along.
You just could say legacy properties are great, but legacy relationships among family members are few and far between. Okay, so yeah,
it's interesting. That's where I think that the option of that DST, and at the end of the day, just you think what's happening in Oregon right now. I mean, they're just passing increase after increase in taxes with absolutely no regard. These people that are governing us, I mean, how ignorant can you be in your understanding of your actions and the repercussions your actions are causing because of, I mean, I call it sort of death by
a thousand taxes.
Well, 1,000 taxes, but it's it's death by compassion. You think you're going to fix everything and save everybody, and all you're doing is destroying everything.
We have a new DST investor in Minnesota. Jim, I'm giving you credit on this. And he calls, and he generationally.
Yes.
I mean, his family goes back, I think, 3 or 4 generations in Minnesota. The lake upon which they have homes was named after his great-grandfather.
Wow.
They've been there forever and a day. So he's not personally leaving, but he calls Minnesota the land of 1,000 lakes
Yes.
and 10,000 taxes. And so he's systematically selling his rentals and moving those out of state because these blue states are simply doubling down on failed progressive government policies. Our last blog was entitled DSTs and the New Urban Radicals. And in it, we talk about the fact that you'd hope that the Democrats learn something from their general election thrashing by the Orange Man. But but they clearly haven't. They're reverting back to type and they're doubling down on failed progressive policies and simply increasing taxes on those people and those things that remain as more money, more people, and more business flees. You know, we're sitting right here in Portland. The U.S. Bancorp Tower, which was Portland's premier property, just sold for less than 1/10 of its 2016 value. That's 90% value destruction in less than a decade. And along with that, 90% of the tax revenue that Portland, Multnomah County collected from that landlord just went up in a puff of smoke. So what do you think that does in terms of a city's ability to continue to deliver services? It makes it even worse. That's The Economist, can't remember the gentleman's name, at the last big commercial real estate powwow in Portland that said, I hate being a skunk at a picnic, but Portland may very well be in an economic doom loop.
Yeah.
And as those businesses leave and tax revenue declines, the ability to provide those goods and services declines even further. So yeah, it's not good.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me, I do have hope because I've seen a few things lately where it seems to me that the general population is starting to get the fact that the government has no money, right? And that any money they have is taken from us. So I think they're finally starting to realize, hey, I want something for the taxes I'm paying. But it's really interesting to me to watch. I mean, what are they doing downtown? I mean, I was downtown last night at dinner at the Ritz-Carlton, QOZ project. That's a whole nother conversation with what's going on with that building. But you think about, so I was down there, and I mean, the only reason I drove is because I valeted there. My car's not going anywhere out of that building. I would not have parked it on the street. So on top of everything else, what's the geniuses at the helm of Portland to get more people down there? Now they're charging parking fees at night. And on weekends, they're like you said, instead of looking at how we can get more people down here, we're going to continue to dig deeper and deeper into everybody's pocket. But I always joke, I said, if I don't have a front license plate on the car and it's parked on the street down there, a guy can be, some homeless guy can be taking a piss on my car, and that's fine, but I'm going to get ticketed for having no front license plate, even though I've paid for the parking there. just because. So they're going to take it from me because they can versus actually cleaning up the mess that's keeping people from going down there. But you think about, I was reading in a blog recently, it was Nordstrom. I mean, one of the last big retailers in downtown Portland is talking about leaving. And the commentary on Oregon Live was just mind-boggling. I mean, people have clearly no understanding of how a city works. And tax revenue, to your point, if you look at that footprint of the U.S. Bancorp building and what that thing full looks like, tax revenue-wise versus what it does today. And you just think about that. One of the guy's comments was, well, retail, brick and mortar retail is a dead thing. I just buy everything at Amazon. I say, okay, number one, you're part of the problem. But number two, the guy was like, I say, well, let's just bulldoze it and we'll put parks in. Well, that takes money. And the sources of money are taxes. And you're eliminating the sources of taxes. But I just don't think and I've made this comment before, I think the smartest thing the government ever did was payroll deductions. Because if you and I paid all our employees a gross paycheck, and they had to, every paycheck, every pay period, had to write the city of Portland a check, had to write the county of whatever, had to write the state, and had to write the federal government checks. One, it would never happen. Two, you'd have a bunch of really, my mom hated this term, pissed off people. And so, in academically, we had a conversation in one of the last blogs too, talking about college or school. They don't teach taxation. I think it's all intentional. They don't want people to understand. They don't teach them the Constitution. They don't teach them taxation. They should be having to learn how to fill out a tax return, understand where this money's going, start asking questions about it. And, the deal is, we're all free. If you want to pay more tax, you're all free to write checks for whatever you want to write checks for, to any organization, good, bad, indifferent, that you want to. But it's that taxation, all you're doing is giving the government money that you could be putting into the things that you find important in your life, but it's going to go here. But it really floors me to watch them doing what they're doing in the city of Portland, watch it. And when I moved here in 1990, it was a small, clean San Francisco. It was a beautiful place. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was one of the foodie capitals of the country, right? And to see it, and like I said last night, I was downtown, and we're in a situation right now where there's a variety of things happening here in town. Whether you think there's crime problems or not, there's clearly problems with the city, and people are not going down there. And hopefully it changes, because it is a wonderful place. But to see our politicians behaving the way they are, I think, one, you're not public servants, okay? Don't give me this. When you're enriching yourself on what you're doing, you're not a public servant. When you're taking a junket to, was it Amsterdam? Our city council went a couple weeks ago because they couldn't find a solution for low-income housing here, affordable housing here. They have to go there. No, you come here, you do your job. If you want to go there, pull your checkbook out, write the check, and you go do it. But to do these junkets on our dime when you have no money, how do they justify that? And these are people that they're not going to be doing the development. They have no experience in it. They have no business talking about it. Get out of the way. Let the people that do this stuff do it.
David, we've been blogging for the last decade about the migration of people, money, and business out of blue states to red states. And we've profiled municipal government, state government, whether it's Washington, Oregon, California, other blue states. And from a legislative and programmatic standpoint, how difficult they've made it for retail landlords. It's clear they're running retail landlords out of the business. So logically, we ask, what's the end game? What are they trying to do? Okay, and clearly, the government thinks it can provide housing better, more efficiently, more economically than the private sector can. And we came to that conclusion a decade ago that, like it or not, Mr. and Mrs. Retail Landlord, the government on the West Coast, the left coast, is pushing you out of business because they want to be in your business. And just recently, what happens? Oh, the state of Oregon is going to get in the housing business. Ms. Kotek has created this fund, God only knows where that money came from, where all this low-income housing is going to be built for the people by the government. Historically, wherever government housing has been created, on whatever continent, it has simply become a magnet for crime, poverty, and degradation. But government, that's where it's at now. Our government, Oregon government, thinks it can provide housing better than the private sector, and by God, nothing's going to stop them from giving it their best shot.
Well, they're doing everything else so well. I'm sure they can improve on the housing too. Since they've got running the city down pat, running the state down pat, inspiring businesses to come in, taken care of. I think, to be honest with you, you're a beneficiary of their poor policies because the number of clients that I know you've worked with that are leaving this region or leaving property ownership because it's just too much. They have no rights of ownership and going into the DST product. But I think the thing that's sort of scary, to me, is that just to look at the accredited investor laws and what they apply to, right? I mean, taking somebody's house out of their net worth, for that. Why? That's something that's there. It's hard to spend. Cash, any stock can be there and be gone the next day. You blow an investment. So why is the house not included? Right?
That's a good question.
But it's politics. They don't want us owning real estate. The thing is, for us, we are old enough where we've had it. For our kids or grandkids, that's where it makes me anxious because, their opportunity, and like old Rush Limbaugh says, what's the government do well? Nothing. Why would you give them any more to do? Go to the DMV if you think they run anything well, right? Go to anything the government does and see how well it's run. And here we are in a situation where, we're allowing these politicians to get in and have no experience doing anything to actually remap things, redo things. And people, historically have moved where they want to move and can afford to live. And now they want to re-engineer communities and say, no, this has got to have this component, all of this stuff, because they know better. And it's just changing everything. And where I see the problem is with the housing, when we've got all these mom and pops that have been, beneficiaries of the real estate world, and the barrier to entry was very small historically, but now they've gotten to a point where they can't afford to maintain or run their own properties. And the rent control laws typically are something that's going to impact the mom and pops more. When you start looking at a REIT, who's buying these bigger properties that we have people selling? And it's typically institutional money. And that's, so we've got a local owner paying local taxes and somebody that cares about the tenants, and they're being squeezed out of the world, and that they're being replaced with Wall Street owned ownership. The money leaves the state, leaves the city, and they don't care about the tenants. And they don't care about the rent control.
No, it's, there's that old saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And, all these progressive government types, bleed for the disadvantaged, the homeless, all that kind of thing. But they do everything possible to further disadvantage them and keep them homeless from a policy standpoint. And in addition to that, you mentioned earlier about how you worry about future generations because being able to invest in real property gave you a stake in the system. That's becoming increasingly difficult. And so what's happening is, from a societal standpoint, we're becoming a nation of renters, young people that never really own anything. They lease their car, they rent their apartment, they rent this, so they have everything they need now, but they own nothing. And so long term, they have little or no equity at stake or in the equation. And that simply transfers more and more power as time goes on to government. They want us to become a nation of renters, because as a nation of renters, we're ultimately dependent on the largesse of government for our physical and emotional well-being. And that's very definitely the way things are moving. And, it's in no small part because, the Democratic Party is now the party. They're socialists. You look at, the man who's about to become mayor of New York is a rabid socialist, and all a socialist is a commie light, okay? And you look at AOC, Bernie Sanders, all of these people, and the older power brokers in the Democratic Party, the Nancy Pelosi's, people like that, always tried to keep that under wraps, under control. So there was this appearance of centrism on the part of the Democratic Party. That's gone. They are now socialists, and it's going to be an increasingly stark choice between socialists who believe that the free market is a bad thing, an evil thing, a destructive thing, and whatever else is out there. Those are the people driving this process to a nation of renters who are increasingly dependent on government for their well-being. So more and more power is concentrated there. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
There's that book, You'll Own Nothing. And it talks about, you think about when we were kids, music, right? If you wanted to hear a song, you'd call up the radio station and request they play the song for you. And that was when we had reel-to-reel tapes. And then we had 8 tracks, and we had cassettes, and then we were burning discs, as time progressed. And now, you had the original iPod and all that. Now it's all digital content. But, you own the music. And today you don't even own the music, right? You're basically part of whatever system, and you're to your point, you're sort of leasing it. With that said, I think that ownership of real estate, let's shift gears back. If somebody's not, and I was walking around Northeast Portland a couple weeks ago and walked by one of the high schools, football game going on, and I mentioned it the other day. There's this house. It was basically a tear-down house and block from the stadium. And I was like, okay, I wonder what that costs. He's like, can't be that much. I think it was like $500 and some odd $1,000. It was really wild. So it was interesting to me. That is a flashing red light on there. I don't know if we're losing juice or what's going on, but what I was going to say, Bob, is that for people, so you think about people's ability to go buy a house. We as we discussed, a REIT is not ownership of real estate. The REIT owns the real estate, but you're not really getting the benefits and burdens of owning it. So if we look at a DST, that would be a way. A minimum investment on a DST is often about $100,000.
Actually, the recommended minimum for 1031 exchange.
Let's just say somebody. Okay, one, I want to say this. So, Bob, do you have to do an exchange to do a DST purchase?
No, you do not.
So, with that said, what's typically a minimum? What would be a floor investment?
$25,000.
$25,000. Now, that's where it should stop, right? I don't mean stop as far as numbers, but that should just be a blank end statement. You got 25, you want real estate, go buy a DST, and now you own some real estate. Unfortunately, you can't unless you're an accredited investor. So what does it take to be an accredited investor today?
You have to have $1 million net worth exclusive of equity in your primary residence, your home.
And we're lucky that it's still that way because there was talk of that going up 2-3 times,
yes,
right? It would have been exorbitant. So where I really have a problem with the accredited investor law is why do you have to be an accredited investor to put $25K into? It could be unencumbered. It could be a $25K ownership interest in that thing with no debt. So if it's unencumbered, the thing's going to be very hard to have go away. Why do you have to be an accredited investor to go buy that instead of, you want to go buy, sorry, this is really funny. I read about it this morning. Some young guy put a fund together and he's got a sperm racing league. And he's raised millions of dollars for this thing. I think it was a guy from USC and a UCLA or something like that. I read it this morning. It was so funny. It's this Jalopnik, this auto blog that I read, and the guy's talking about it. And they were like, well, we feel bad. Maybe we ought to cut it off at $300,000 or something. What are these people? One guy wrote him $300,000 for this sperm race league. But okay, you don't have to be an accredited investor to go do that, but you have to be an accredited investor to go buy into a DST.
Yeah, and it all comes back to the liquidity issue, because if you put $25,000 in a DST and you're dumber than a piece of wood, and it's all the only $25,000 that you have, and the next day something catastrophic happens and you've got to get at that money, you can't get at that money with a DST, whereas if you put it in a sperm racing league, nominally you can get it back. Okay? So it's all a question of liquidity. Okay?
Yeah, interesting though, and we'll see what's going on. But there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, in real estate, you think about the Section 121, the universal exclusion, that 250 or 500 somebody's got, and that was 1997, and there's some. I hadn't heard anybody talking about making changes, and politically, it floored me that I hadn't heard any conversations about that all these years later. And it sounds like finally there's kicking around some ideas that, what they're talking about, eliminating the tax on the sale of primary residence, which obviously, being in the business I'm in, I immediately think of, okay, so they're going to really have to work on the definition of primary residence and how long things fit to qualify. And I think I mentioned earlier, one of the most viewed videos we've got on our YouTube channel is holding periods and fallacy of 5-year hold, which has to do with a property acquired via 1031, converted to primary residence and sold. If it's sold within 5 years of acquisition, it's fully taxable. After that, you're subject to something called the Housing Assistance Tax Act. But it's just. The government sees things happen, and they give us rules, which give us a pathway, but also sort of tie our hands with things. But it's sort of, it gives me hope that at least these things are being discussed, because liquidity to real estate is critical to the vibrancy of the real estate market. I mean, anytime I see a property sold, the buyer inevitably is pumping money into that property. And we start looking at affordable housing. I think the best place they could go, instead of wanting to go and, back to your comment on our local politicians, our governor, I mean, you are not a property developer. You have no business getting into that. You don't know what you're doing, and you're not going to. But get out of the way, give the people that do that a clean, short runway to get it done, and it'll happen. But still, you're talking about costs, and why not just take and allow those BC properties to be sold, and encourage people to be getting those things up to a quality that really is taking care of people and providing that lower and affordable housing. Because to build something new, when they want the SDCs at the level they are, you can't afford to build low income affordable housing.
Well, it's not affordable.
Yeah, it's not affordable, especially if they're building it, right? So to take care of and that market velocity increases the value and quality of all the property in the market. A high tide lifts all boats, unless the boat's got big holes in it, and it's not going to go up, right? So we don't want that BC property to not rise with the tide. We want it to be able to rise with the tide. So I think that, really, get out of the way, let the people that understand the business do it, and make things happen. But Endgames, I do, we've done so much, fractional ownership work with you with real estate through the years. And, it's been a lot of fun to, see the successes. And, there's been some hiccups and bumps there too. And I think that's just where, back to my comment earlier on wealth preservation, understand that all sponsors are not created equally. And that if you're fortunate enough to have gains and you needing to do an exchange, then make sure that what you're buying is something that's going to fit your needs, and whether it's the 721 or the DST, or you want you got to understand, read everything, understand what's there and where you're going with it. But there's options there that fit, and even if you're selling a primary residence, there's situations where you need to do an exchange. Even, believe it or not, with IRAs and 401ks, and not necessarily as much with the 401ks, but even a Roth-owned IRA that owns real estate, if it's a leveraged asset, that transaction, you're thinking, well, gee, I got a Roth IRA, anything I make is tax-free. Not true. You're conducting business with that IRA, or you're buying something that's leveraged, the income or gain attributable to other people's money, the debt is going to trigger tax. So there used to be a guy years ago that would say, well, gee, why would you do 1031s when you can take your IRA, go buy real estate, and you don't need to worry about 1031? I said, no, you're wrong. There's even IRAs that, even a Roth IRA can be in a situation where it has to do an exchange. So
be as informed as possible.
Yeah. So anything else for the good of the cause today, Bob? Or we sort of talked it out? We touched a lot of different things. I
think we talked it out, partner.
Yeah.
Really did.
So David Moore, one half of the Exchange Bros, with Robert Smith of Peregrine Private Capital. Bob, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
503-241-4949 or rs@peregrineprivatecapital.com.
Thanks for being in here today, old friend. It's entertaining. I hope the audience enjoys it. Sorry, we did get a little bit political at one point, but we've gotten some pushback recently from literal elements on our blogs because they are increasingly politicized. Sadly, that's a necessary evil. A generation ago, Wall Street led and the government followed. That has now flip-flopped. All the power is in government, and the financial sector follows. So it is the political process that is shaping and driving things now from a valuation standpoint, desirability, lack of desirability standpoint. So if you are going to make well-informed decisions with regard to your investments, you have to understand what is going on politically, okay? If you don't, you will make a bad decision. So you cannot escape the reality of the fact that the political class now drives things. So when you're making an investment decision, you are well served if you factor that into your equation, okay? End of story. Yeah. I mean, you just think back to COVID. And you think about what happened, unfortunately, to many of our investors, right? I mean, they own the property, and the bank's not going to sit back. But the governor says, "Well, gee, the tenants don't have to pay because it's not fair." Well, meanwhile, they've got property owners that are having issues. So you just got to be prepared for it. And you think about. Historically, at the end of the day, people would migrate from houses into clusters of houses, multifamily, and then they would migrate from multifamily into maybe industrial, and ultimately they'd end up in a big box single tenant building, and that was a great solution for people. But it's a changed world these days, and even somebody like Walgreens, how many stores have they closed in the Bay Area? I mean, and that's been because of a variety of reasons, but you just got to look at it and understand, be informed, listen to whatever podcast you can to get good information. Hopefully we're one of them. If you've got questions on things you'd like to see us address, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're always looking to provide you content. And those of you that stumbled around our sites, you know that we've got everything that, on there, from cost seg to selling life insurance policies, right? And why would I do that? Because I've got investors that are looking for money, and maybe that's a source that, instead of letting the thing lapse and go away, maybe they should sell the policy and get some money out of it, and they can go leverage into a $25,000 DST or something like that. So really, we just really take pride in trying to get information out that I think's niche information, and I enjoy it. So thank you so much, and we will look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.